Hello, hello. Welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. We're jumping on a minute early. I'm here with Brandon Sterling today, and I'm going to go ahead and get Rockfin set up. Come and say hi in the chat if you guys are out there. Yeah, some people are joining. That's awesome. Been a serious shadow ban on YouTube. My last few have been downright sad, but maybe we're gonna. This is a hot topic, Brandon.
Oh, it definitely is. It's controversial for some people. To me, it's just standard outlook on things. But yeah, it's going to trigger a lot of people, but hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. It seems to be highly polarizing, which is always a good thing. You want that. People are afraid of that, but it is exactly what you want, to have that strong yes or strong no. So just having a little tiny issue with Rockfin. Let's see. It's not recognizing the stream for some reason. Oh, there it goes. Awesome. All right. So, and Mike New is in the room. Hello, Mike New. How are you? Good to see you. Come and say hello in the chat. How's it going, everyone? And I always feel to go on time. Some people wait around for a while. But the recording will be there for anyone who misses the beginning. So I will go ahead and Jody's here. Excellent. Nice to see you guys. I always like to hear from you in the chat, let you know. Oh, Trinity 4, excellent. Good to see you as well. Financial collapse psyops. Yeah, good. You see this. I know actually I've gotten more than a few messages in the last couple of days saying, yeah, I knew it. Just when they started to flood my feeds with all kinds of messages, right? That those are signs. Now, every time something goes viral in the truth community, I'm like, oh, it's not real. Good.
Yeah,
Right?
you can use that as a barometer pretty much.
That's it. Because organic traffic doesn't travel like that. It's really different. Information is different. So yeah, and we got a good crowd on Rockfin. Come and say hi in the chat there as well. And so if you're not familiar with Brandon, Mojo Shop is here. I'm going to just let you read a bio that he has. It's actually quite nice. So from a young age, Brandon saw through the spiritual veils that have been cast over us. And early on, he began to have run-ins with characters in the esoterica and had several Job-like experiences. So that is often the catalyst, right? Where you face adversity, where things might seem impossible. I'm sure that's what you mean by a Job experience. And they send you into a deeper inquiry about what is life about? What is the purpose here? What am I going to be doing? And it makes you grow up faster. I will say that, you don't wish that on anybody, but it is a thing. So, yep. And so he began focusing on private ventures in 2016, went on to found Safe Haven Portfolio Management, which is an association that demonstrates risk hedging strategies and solutions to those seeking privacy and financial optionality. We've been talking a lot about the private domain. I'll just let you guys know, and I'll talk about it a bit more later, that Brandon is a guest contributor to the next Primal Power private domain course that's coming up May 29th with a May 22nd early bird. So I'll share a link with you guys about that. So that was actually really exciting. Now, both Clint Richardson and Brandon have done the interview about the 5 archetypes that govern over our fears, right? I mean, they're all fears, but these are the core fears where you feel like, yeah, I'm not going to live through this. Therefore, I have to, be a victim, prostitute myself, sabotage myself, totally depolarize the energy between your masculine and feminine. That's a little more esoteric to say in a nutshell. And then for sure, they don't want us going on our sacred purpose or anything, right? Because if everybody did that, then this has always been my feeling, we would actually be uncontrollable as a result, because we answer to God and not the state. And so, yeah, after seeing the world for what it was, Brenton immersed himself in many studies and came to hone in on business, capital markets, and law. And that's very interesting as well. Now, we won't go in depth in PMAs because we're here to talk about the financial collapse, supposed financial collapse. But there's a lot to say. He definitely has a lot to say about the free about the private domain. So yeah, maybe we'll just leave that for now because it's a can of worms.
Sure.
And hello, Rob. Nice to see you. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the stream. So, are you ready to dive in, Brenton?
Let's do it.
I hear you have lots of data for us.
I do. I'm not a visual person myself, so I think it will help those that are as well.
Yeah,
It's not going to be rhetoric. It's going to be actual data and real time. So
there you go. Yeah, it was one of the things that I think is very much to your credit is that you weren't trained in the truth movement.
no.
Right? You're trained with, what I understood from the little bit that you said, like elders or people who have really lived and had experience and were actually positioned to mentor, and they didn't have all of the junk, unfortunately, that we have from the truth and freedom movement. That is, I was debating if I could start over again, would I start as a normie again, and just look at these things with fresh eyes. And Kara's here. Fantastic. Nice to see you. It's been a little while. So let's talk about, first of all, the financial collapse. This is something that I've been hearing about for, um, I guess, for me, since about 2015, because before that, I ran with my head down, put my blinders on, didn't look at anything. I missed the so-called financial collapse, if it is a so-called one, of 2008, was it?
Yeah, the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis. Yeah.
Right. I completely missed it. It didn't affect me
Yeah.
at all. Right. I
Yeah.
could look away. And those kind of things. If you don't look at the news and you don't have any evidence in your life, is it real? So, yeah. So where have you been coming from in terms of watching the markets? Like you said, or how long have you been watching the markets? Let's start with that.
Well, back in 2015, just like you, I thought the crash was coming. And it was with a business associate of mine. It was about when I was 20 years old, somewhere around there. And, I was fortunate enough to be around those that were older, more experienced in business, and then later on in the investment hedge fund world. But back in 2015, somehow the topic of real estate came up. And when I was talking to an older mentor of mine, a private individual that's definitely not in the truth movement, far removed, he's in reality. Um, the markets, the housing market in particular, got brought up, and he was a real estate investor, and I was saying, well, I'm waiting for the crash to happen, and then I'll buy real estate with cash. And he goes to me, gives me a look, and he says, "What crash? It's not going to happen." And sure enough, the old man is right. There's a phrase out there: the old man is always right, and in this case, he was. And the housing market boomed from 2015 even up to this point. Really, could have made a fantastic return, but I guess I was young and thought I knew better when I really had someone trying to help me, and of course I didn't listen. And but it was a really good lesson looking back. Um, for especially in 2015, there was a lot of reasons why the crash wasn't going to happen, but we can get into that. But essentially, that was my first exposure to realizing I was wrong about my bias on that the whole financial system was going to collapse. And I think a lot of us were biased after 2008, but there was a lot of caveats on why that happened. Um, doesn't necessarily mean the same reasons it would happen back then is going to happen now. It was very idiosyncratic for 2006 and 2007 to lead up to that GFC. So I will be talking about that, but yeah, it's funny that people are still in that. But essentially, I always had an interest in the stock market in particular. I always wondered why it moved the way it did, and I got into that in actually 2019. I actually saw the 2020 drop coming early, and I wanted to monetize on it, and so I started studying it myself. Um, and so I actually started shorting the market back in February 2020. So I was lucky. And then later on, within that year, I actually got mentored by those who were in the hedge fund investment banking world. I found these guys privately. I mean, you can't find these guys if you really try. I mean, they're really difficult. I've always had a way to meet people that I want to in networking and stuff. I've always had a strength in that. So I was able to finagle my way in, and basically I got a way better education than you could ever get in a finance degree or anything like that in a matter of a couple of years. And then I started trading my own capital after that, emulating a professional portfolio manager. And I was lucky enough to have those guys kind of hold my hand at the beginning, make sure I was doing it right. And with that knowledge now, I'm able to do it myself and show people the same process.
All right, very good. And I'm curious about like the dollar itself, because one of the things that convinced me about the collapse was the historical fact, and you can definitely let me know if that's not the case, that every dollar has died, every currency has died an ugly death in the
Well, it's
history.
not true.
Okay.
Let me show you a chart actually.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Let's see here.
And hello, Michelle. Candace, I'm glad you're here. Happy belated Mother's Day. I always reject mainstream holidays. But that's sweet anyway. Hello, Gina on Rockfin. Glad you're here.
All right.
See more people. There it is. Okay.
So can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So this is the dollar index, DXY. Sometimes we call it the Dixie. And this is going all the way back. This is basically displaying the strength of the dollar. And this is all the way going back to 1940, even previously. And this is where we are today. Actually, I'm sorry. This is inflation, actually.
Is there any way to make the chart itself bigger? Just because it's kind of truncated in the window.
I did notice that. Let me see.
Maybe just to enlarge the screen or something.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try this again.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We're going to talk about CBDCs as well. And this week, the Bank of Canada sent out a survey. They are interested in our opinion. They want to know if we really like and want this or not. And they're just going to follow our lead. Yeah, right.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is going back to the 1970s, the dollar.
There.
And
That's awesome.
as you can see, it's very stable, actually. And where we are today at $1.02 and some change, it's actually on the higher level of things above the standard deviation.
Can you let us know what this graph is again?
Yeah, this is the dollar index. So this is just tracing the value of the dollar, essentially.
And how the value of the American dollar, not relative to anything, because it's the reference point, right?
The dollar is the ultimate currency. Yes, it is the reserve currency of the world. By the way, that's not changing anytime soon. I know there's a lot of rhetoric saying that it's gonna that's gonna change. We'll get into that why it's not to, but yeah, as you can see, though, it's extremely stable. So I just want to share that as a reference of where we are right now and where we have been. As you can see, where we are right now, we've touched this level many, many times before. And actually, like I was saying, it's on the higher deviation of things. And it went up actually last year for several reasons. We'll get into why. But it's actually pretty stable, especially considered to other currencies.
Okay.
So just
Good
wanted to
know.
share that.
Indeed. And so then there's a big push on, say, another, in the freedom community talking about using cash, turning to using cash. There's also, the take your cash out of the bank. The banks are going to have a total fail and steal your money, and you're laughing already. So,
Yeah, I mean, look, I did make a video actually with Clint Richardson, and it's called the Bank Run Psyop. And I made that about 2 months ago almost, where everyone was freaking out. The bank run, everyone was talking about it on Telegram. Oh, hurry, pull out your money.
yeah.
And sure enough, nothing happened. Everyone's money was safe. So we can get into that a little bit. But essentially, as long as you have under 250K in your bank account, it's going to be insured anyways. So I don't know why people are freaking out. And another thing too is, as long as you're with a bank that isn't a regional bank, and even then there's a caveat, because the banks that we've seen collapse recently in this past year were regional banks who had an abnormal amount of unsecured deposits, which basically means they didn't have any assets backing it up. And so when you needed to liquidate, they didn't have anything backing it up, essentially. And so those banks that had the highest levels of unsecured or uninsured deposits, I should say, even then, those people still got their deposits back. But
Interesting.
that's not the bulk of banks. That was only a few that we've seen lately. And there might be a couple more that topple over. There's several reasons why the regional banks in particular are toppling over. The main reasons are, I want to sum it up really quick because we have a lot to go over. But if you want to get the full minutia, watch the Bank Run Psyop video I have on my YouTube that she's got linked. But essentially, with regional banks, they have less regulation. And I'll get into that here in a little bit, than, let's say, the large banks like Bank of America or JP Morgan Chase. And so they have a lot more latitude to have more risk in the bank portfolio. And I think that will be fixed soon. I think it got a little bit out of hand, and there's reasons why that I'll get into, but that's essentially a quick sum up of why you shouldn't freak out about your money being stolen from the banks. They couldn't get away with that.
Right, right. Yeah. And then what happens when people go and actually do take their money out of the bank? Like, does that hurt the system overall? It's what my sister told me when I was trying to warn her.
Well, I shouldn't say it hurts the system because it'll be circulated back into the economy anyways.
Unless you're burying it in your backyard.
Well, even then, that's still accounting for empty money supply, which is accounted for anyways. So it really doesn't hurt the system. But if everyone did that all at once, yes, it would affect the entire banking sector. But again, there's no reason to do that. And second of all, what are you going to do with the cash? I mean, just let it sit and bury it in your yard? I mean, that's a poor use of capital. Your net present value is just going to keep going down and down by the day. So why would you do that? It's just like hoarding gold or silver. It's just a horrible, it's not even an investment, especially silver. We can get into that too, because there's a lot of narratives that everyone should do that. So
Right. Yeah. Hoarding is never good, right?
it's not.
It makes
Yeah.
very, even just on an esoteric energy level, it makes for stagnant energy. And that's where death accumulates. Right. So if I noticed this, like, real quick example. I've been hoarding blankets, and I come from blanket makers, and there's the heirlooms, and then there's the ones I think I'm going to need because the system's collapsing and all that kind of thing. Well, lo and behold, my moths got into my blankets and started eating them. And they were literally coming to clean up the mess that I left behind. Right, even though they're all just stacked and nicely folded and all that kind of thing, but they were just they were there to, like, oh, Beth's hoarding. We need to, or Beth's got a garbage pile here. We need to eat this up and help her out. So yeah, unfortunately, that is the case. So where would you like to focus? I have a feeling I'm going to take you on the garden path with my questions.
So I want to focus on the question that everyone's asking right now: is the U.S. on the brink of a banking crisis?
Okay.
So right now, the Federal Reserve is referring to what they call sound conditions in banking. But we've recently had 3 regional banks fail, of course, in the last year. And so in April of this year, there is what's called the Senior Loan Officer Opinion Survey on Bank Lending Practices, the SOLSS. It was released recently. And so since 1870, we've had 4 big world recessions. And they're driven by wars, pandemics, or banking crises. And so when caused by banking crises, the average drop in global GDP is about 4%. And so I do want to share a nice chart for you guys to display this.
Sounds
good. Do this again.
And Dean, I see your question. I'm going to keep an eye on it. And Nick said they couldn't get away with that. Good luck, young men.
All right. Well, this sounds like fear porn.
Yeah.
All right. So this is going back to 1876. These are all the let's call panics. So as you can see, Great Depression was the most dramatic. There's several reasons why that happened. World War II was the second most significant. And then GFC was in 2008. And by the way, these numbers are reflecting the global GDP drops. So
Can you explain GDP? I'm like green about all this stuff.
it's basically just displaying the income level of each country.
It's gross what?
Gross domestic product.
Domestic product, right?
It's just a fancy term for displaying income growth for a country.
And that's their production in goods and services. Is that
all of that combined? Yeah.
okay?
So yeah, even 2008 wasn't even that dramatic compared to, let's say, the past. But during the scamdemic, of course, we had negative 6.2% globally. And again, this is global, not US. US will outperform this a little bit, but overall, compared to other countries, just because we significantly have the largest economy. I mean, Europe is actually a third of the size of our economy, if you want some scale. So anyways, just want to share that for reference. So in that picture, we had data going back to 1873, and we've had global recessions and drops of GDP that goes along with them in terms of real GDP per capita and the catalysts why, right? So we had a number of banking panics, and as you could see, the most recent, of course, was the GFC in 2008. Globally, we had a drop of 2.9% of global GDP. So no doubt, looking at the data banking crises, it always results from tighter lending standards, actually. And tightening lending standards affects small US businesses. And so there's another chart I'm going to share real quick, displaying this historically, when they start tightening on the lending and how that affects business.
Okay. Yeah, they were very obviously targeting the small business. That was clear as day, right? Opening the Walmarts and closing mom and pop.
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, a lot of those guys also too took out the PP loans, which was a scam.
Okay. Is there any way to make it big? It's low.
I wish. Let me see.
Okay, no worries.
There we go.
You got it? Excellent.
Yeah, yeah.
That helps. Okay. Just take the banner
So
down.
the light blue line is the percentage of banks tightening on the lending. And then the dark blue is the Fed discount window usage, basically allowing the banks to give more lending, to sum it up really quickly. So as you can see, when I was alluding to earlier, what happened in 06, 07 led up to 08, here we go. This is one of the big catalysts of why that happened. And as you can see, actually, we had another spike during the scamdemic, obviously for conditions during then. And right now we're right here. The Fed discount window usage just peaked recently in March.
Okay,
So
and what's the practical outcome of that? That they are tightening more than
they're going to tighten on business lending, essentially.
right.
It's
So
about to start. Where I'm a little bit early on this, but it is going to start here in the next few months, if it hasn't already.
And again, forgive me, but tightening means they want to give less loans.
Exactly. They're going to be, and there's going to be more criteria on who gets the loans, who doesn't. So I'll get into that.
Okay.
So yeah, in that dark blue line where it spiked, this is when the banks are taking advantage of the Fed's liquidity, essentially. And then the lighter blue line that you saw was where there was a slight lag where you'll see the banks then tighten their lending standards disproportionately for small business going back in 2008. And then we peaked recently in March this year. So here's another chart. This one is going to sum up. This is going to show credit tightening from the banks, and then what proceeds with that with lower business optimism, which is highly correlated to economic performance. And it's clearly not good for the economy. So when this happens, we see in the chart that I'm going to show that it actually decreases small business loans, and then that proceeds to more layoffs. So let me share that.
All right, here it comes.
Oops, went a little too far. There we go. All right. So small business optimism's light blue, Net percentage of easing standards for small business lending is in the dark blue. As you can see, past performance, and here it is today, not looking so great, right?
Mhm.
It's probably going to go down even more next coming months.
Can you go
So,
back? Can
oh
you go
yeah,
back to that? Sorry. I'm gonna.
is that still sharing?
No, it's not showing anymore.
Okay, let me share that again.
Yeah. So the net easing. What is easing?
Just easing on the lending, right?
Got it. Okay. Very good. Yeah, I'm green to all of this stuff. So yeah. And then the small business optimism is like literally that they're optimistic about or not, right?
Yeah,
Meaning they're taking risks and
right.
investing capital and starting new projects. Is that true?
Exactly.
Okay.
And as you can see, it's in the negatives. Um, so, as far as optimism go, not the greatest. And again, that's highly correlated to overall economic growth, since small businesses are about 60% of businesses in the US. And I always use the US as reference because we have to look at the US worldwide when we're looking at economics. So my
Okay.
guys in Europe, my guys in Asia, they're looking at this data too because it's the most relevant.
Right on.
So, okay, so now that we've had that, to sum it up, basically, with tighter lending standards, which is already here actually, and lower risk appetite in banks, this affects small businesses the most and who are the most dependent on regional banks lending to them. So, US small businesses make up about 2/3 of the jobs in the US. And so, banks with under $250 billion of assets on their balance sheets makes up 80% of commercial real estate lending. And we saw that at the end of Q4, quarter four last year, office space vacancy rates are down close to 20% vacancy overall. Since mid March, commercial real estate has been widely seen as actually the next shoe to drop. So, and I'm not saying go short some commercial bank or commercial real estate stocks now, it might be already too late. Should have seen that coming if you are a trader. But any US bank with a balance sheet with less than $250 billion on their balance sheet doesn't have to fall in line with what's called the net stable funding ratio, which basically just is a fancy term for keeping banks so they're not over leveraging themselves. So the regional banks all fall under this $250 billion threshold, and they don't have to adhere to the net stable funding ratio, that NSFR. So the NSFR regulates the large banks to have a large proportion of their liabilities, which just means like a losing position on their balance sheet, and sticky long-term funding. And that limits their liquidity risk. But regional banks, they aren't regulated like this. And so another thing they aren't regulated by is what's called the liquidity coverage ratio, the LCR, which just means they can buy a disproportionate amount of less liquid securities, like corporate bonds, MBSs, mortgage-backed securities, instead of treasuries, which is precisely what they did in the pursuit of yield, aka profit. They're trying to chase more profit by getting into riskier securities, like the ones I just listed. And so when we're in the previous environment of low to negative interest rates that we had been for almost 10 years until recently, so for example, a balance sheet of $249 billion, it's not really a small bank to give you a big picture. A top three German bank actually has less than $200 billion on their balance sheet. So we do need to get that perspective. And so in the past 10 years, the regional banks have increased their share of total banking lending in the US. And this is why they're so important, because regulation restricted the large banks, forcing the large banks to bolster their liquidity and capital reserves. So basically, they had to have more cash on hand. So the regional banks moved in to fill that gap actually because of the high regulation they didn't have to adhere to. So they saw an opportunity there, or at least so they thought. And so they saw the gap, they're trying to fill it. The landscape became more competitive in the lending space, and in particular, commercial real estate, which again still has a 20% office vacancy nationwide in the US, which is obviously not good. So I'm going to share another chart, and this chart is going to display small US banks who have increased their market share of bank loans from 15, 16%, all the way up to now 40%. And the large banks have gone down from over 80% to now down to 60%. So you can see how the scales have shifted. And also, the small banks increase their bank loans as a percentage of GDP. So as you'll see on the chart I'm going to show on the right side, there's going to be two charts actually in one. And this is all going to be particularly commercial real estate.
Okay,
So
and after I want to ask you about negative interest rates, but go ahead so you
okay,
can keep your frame of mind there.
sure.
There it is.
So big banks are in the light blue, small regional banks are in the red. As you can see, inverse relationship.
Hmm.
And then we have the corporate, the residential real estate, and the commercial real estate all displayed here. Commercial real estate in the red over here on the right, and percent of GDP. So as you can see, after everything I've gone over here, am I thinking, oh gosh, this isn't good. So yeah, we can get into interest rates real quick.
Yeah, that was one of the markers when people started talking about negative interest rates, that was the beginning of the absolute end.
No, it's not true actually. And we're past that now. We're past negative interest rates. They're positive interest rates now, obviously, with the Federal Reserve hiking interest rates the past year. And that's also why we've seen a little bit of economic pain the last couple of years. Because as soon as they started to announce, hey, we're going to raise interest rates, they didn't surprise us. They told us months before it was going to happen. So it shouldn't have shocked anyone. But these regional banks, they weren't ready for that. They were assuming that we're going to be in negative interest rates continually because the risk management departments are really almost non-existent, especially in Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank. There's a bunch of woke millennials. They didn't know what they're doing. And there was some corruption going on there too. Sometimes these banks are designed to fail so the shareholders can get out and skate out with some money, which we saw in Lehman Brothers and stuff like that too. So it's a combination of those things.
Okay, good to
But
know.
it's never one thing or the other. It's often a mixture. But yeah, we are past negative interest rates. That's not sustainable long term. In fact, my opinion is we should make money more expensive to borrow. It's actually healthier for the economy overall. It's going to cause some pain in the short term, but overall, it's good for us. And that's what we're seeing happen right now.
Right. And Kara, I see your question about Fed now. I'll ask when
we'll talk about that. There's a lot of confusion on that.
No doubt.
So yeah, on the Senior Loan Officer Opinion Survey on bank lending practices I was alluding to earlier, this is the latest release that was on May 8th. And what this survey looks at is the changes in the standards, terms, and demands for banking loans for businesses and households. And so over Q1 of this year, it asked them also, okay, what is your outlook for the rest of 2023, these lending officers? And so it was universally negative across all loan categories. And so survey participants, again, these loan officers, reported that they're seeing tighter lending standards and weaker demand actually for commercial industrial loans to large and middle market firms and to small firms as well. And so they also noted tighter lending standards are starting to be here in respect to commercial real estate categories, again, due to the high vacancy rates, and other categories like residential real estate, and for all types of consumer loans like auto loans, for example, etc. So because of uncertain economic outlook and reduced risk tolerance, concerns about their own funding and costs and liquidity positions, and deterioration in collateral values, so treasuries and corporate bonds I was telling you that they were investing in. So I'm going to show another chart, and this is going to go over an increase in terms of tightening loan standards for commercial and industrial loans. And so basically, it's just going to show that the availability is coming harder and the terms are becoming tighter to get these loans. So let me share my screen real quick.
Yeah, that's the exact opposite. I think of the bank as a business that it will take anybody's business. It doesn't matter the risk. They just want to lend money like madmen.
Well, it certainly may seem that way, but especially right now, you're going to see that change.
Right on.
So yeah, as you can see, this is a net percentage of domestic respondents tightening standards for commercial and industrial loans on the top. As you can see, we're getting pretty high here. And the cross-reference here it is compared to 2008, right? And so, and then below here is the net percent of domestic respondents increasing spreads of loan rates over banks' cost of funds. So this basically just shows, okay, this is the cost of the banks handing out these loans, which is going higher. So both of these things going higher is going to cause lending obviously to go down. Not only for the profitability of the bank, but for the economic conditions. So yeah, that's a nice way to sum it up. Now, this is kind of the doom and gloom, right? Because I do want to show you guys where we are and where we could be going potentially. This isn't the end all be all, but it is something interesting to look at. And as I've shown you, it's highly correlated to past performances historically, all these data points that we're at right now. So here's kind of like my bull case. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Overall, I am still bearish. Not saying it's going to collapse. The whole system's going to collapse. Not saying that at all.
And bearish, if you can, like, I know generally what that means, but how are you using that word?
Yeah, there's a dichotomy in markets. There's called the bull markets and the bear markets. The bull markets just means everything's going to keep going up. The bear markets means things are going to keep going down, essentially. Right now, technically, we're still in a bear market, but I'm actually going to display for you guys, we're very close to entering into a bull market in the stock market. So, and again, like I always say in my videos, the stock market, they're ahead of schedule about a year than us. It's actually used as a proxy by hedge fund managers of where GDP is going a year ahead of time. So that's why we started seeing the markets dropping almost a couple years ago now, which I did monetize on, but anyways, I digress. So the bull case. So the banks that were recently, the U.S. Actually, let me start here. The U.S. has about $6 trillion in circulation, more than they did pre-scamdemic, and so that's a lot, by the way. And so for U.S. pension funds, which is the majority of who the market is owned by, they have what's called assets under management, AUM, and that totals in about $25 trillion, which, by the way, the pension funds are set up as trusts, private trusts. And so
Thanks, right?
just like the banks, yes. And we can get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
And so in a bull market, these funds will have a cash position of around 3%. And again, a bull market means that we're in a good growing market like we were previously. And so in a bear market, their cash position actually goes up to 7% because they expect a sell-off in the stock market or an inevitable recession. And then they wait and sit on this cash, and then they'll deploy the cash, and then they'll generate the outperformance that they're trying to get. So right now, it appears to me to be the high end of cash balances for pension funds, actually. We're around that 7%, like I mentioned earlier. So most people right now, they're expecting recession. But now if in a fat cash position of 7% goes back to, let's say, 3% in a bull market, in a technical bull market, that's close to $1 trillion looking to be deployed back in the stock market. And this doesn't even include hedge funds, which is more billions and possibly trillions, and everyday people who invest in the market on their own nowadays, which has become a huge trend ever since 2020, more than ever. We're at historical highs, which is, I think, is good, but it also can be bad because a lot of people are misguided and they invest poorly because they don't know what they're doing. But I always tell people you should learn how to do it right. That way you're not dependent on a third party, like a 401k pension fund for that matter. So what I'm going to pull up is the S&P 500. This is the main index of the U.S. stock market. And again, the U.S. stock market, since it's the biggest market in the world, all markets around the world highly correlated to it. It follows it, essentially.
Okay.
So let me set that.
Yeah, while you pull that up, Kara is saying that shareholders, aka criminals and crooks, is that a hard rule? Do you think, shareholders?
For what? Banks?
I assume anything, any.
Oh, that's not true.
No.
If now in a Lehman Brothers case, right, or San SBF, the recent bank we saw collapse in California. Yes, those shareholders were corrupt, but it's not all banks that are like that.
Right.
I mean, just remember, there is no such thing as good guys or bad guys. It's all about financial outcomes, and most people want good financial outcome for their own individual selves and their families.
Right. Right.
So there is no white hats, there is no black hats, and we got to get out of this dichotomy.
Right. That's the framework that is that evil dichotomy. Or
Right. Not all banks are evil. Okay.
good to know.
So this is S&P 500. So back in October of 2022, this is actually the low of the bear market. And so the professional portfolio managers, they look at lows and they measure that where we are today. So as you can see, here we are today, and the S&P 500. This is the futures chart. By the way, futures control markets worldwide. It's not even the stock market itself, which is fascinating.
And
These
what?
are these are contracts essentially.
Okay.
They're
Yep.
valued in time,
Okay.
but they're the underline of all markets. And I do demonstrate in my Capital Markets Insiders Club how to utilize these and monetize on them. But essentially, here we are today around, let's say, the $4,143 a share price level. So this is actually another thing that I want to talk about. Now, I mentioned that we're actually getting close to getting into a bull market again. Obviously, we're in a bull market in 2022. A technical bear market is when we're 20% below where we were in a previous point. But right now, today, we're actually almost at the 20% level back up again. So if we go above that 20% level, we're actually in a technical bear market in the stock market. So that is an interesting. We're about 16% above the October 2021 lows. And so a technical bull market is when we're up more than 20% more above that low. So if we hit the $4,302 price level in the S&P 500, which is the main index of the entire, that is the stock market essentially. We are in a technical bull market, and a lot of shorts, which is basically traders or portfolio managers, put it on a position where they're betting that the market's going to go down, and if it goes down, they actually make money out of it. That's what that money or that movie, The Big Short, was about. That was a short trade essentially.
Okay.
And by the way, there's a lot of rhetoric out there that says all hedge funds just only short markets. That's not true. It's called hedge funds for a reason because they're 50% short and 50% long. That way, no matter what, they're always going to make money. And I actually demonstrate for my clients to do that for themselves. You're going to outperform the market doing that. You're always going to be hedged out for a black swan event that we never see coming. And so if that black swan does occur, you're not going to lose any money. In fact, you're going to monetize on that. In a bull market, you're still going to monetize that as well because you're always hedged out. So we need to break that programming too.
Very good. Brendan, your mic has a lot of noise. I don't know if there's anything that you can do, but
Okay. Yeah, sometimes it moves around and all right, fix that. So yeah, we're very close to the technical bull market in the stock market. And when that happens, actually, when we reach that price level of $4,300 in S&P, the shorts are actually going to be what's called covered. So basically, they'll just cash out those positions. And in that case, it's going to be a losing position because they don't want to lose any more money. Because when you're short the market, there's infinite downside. So you got to be really careful when you're shorting. And so money that's been on the sidelines, what I was talking about with the pension funds, which is over $1 trillion, it's going to come back into the market. By the time that happens, the mainstream media will be reflecting on the markets going up. And by then, those at home will start to be buying as well because they see it on the screen. But, it might not be a bad thing in a bull market, but a little too late, in my opinion. And so regardless of deteriorating earnings of companies, because remember, the stock market is not the economy. It's a reflection of corporate profitability, essentially, in their earnings. And so regardless of deteriorating earnings we've seen, deteriorating data, geopolitically, stuff like that, markets have refused to keep selling off. Like I showed you, we hit the low in October 2022. Hasn't gone any lower since. You got to realize that the funds, the pension funds, have a net long bias, which basically means they keep buying. They're not going to short. They're not going to do any of that. They just keep buying. They're what's called net buyers, not net sellers. So in the cash reserves of the pension funds, there's about over $1 trillion that could come in and flood the market. And we could hit that $4,300 S&P price level to get us into the bull market again. Now, I'm not certain this will happen, but it's something to be aware of and not a 0% chance of being improbable. So do what the hedge funds do. And that triggers a lot of people when I say that, right? Because we've gotten a bad rap on them instead of understanding how the model works. So they think hedge funds are evil because they've heard of hedge funds shorting the market, which, again, it's only half of the story, literally. Betting on stocks going down and making money on the downside. But again, that's only half the story. So again, they're called hedge funds for a reason because they're half long and half short. And so now the people, the influencers telling you to pull money out of the banks because a bank run is coming. You got to realize them broadcasting that and people taking action creates the bank run itself. And so if you participate in that, you fell for a psyop and you played into a rich man's game. You see, these people in the alternative media in places like Telegram, they're armchair economists. And even actual economists, they're not, if you follow their data, you're not going to make any money on that or anticipate things. They're often wrong. They're just theorists. So they don't have contacts in Wall Street. They don't have contacts in real hedge funds or anything like that. In fact, they're pitching fear so you buy their affiliate links for gold, silver, cryptos.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Trinity, for hedge that like button. Very good. Yeah, and oh my gosh, yeah, there's a lot of, we'd have to do a part 2 on this one. So much response here. I like what Rob said, Marcus, don't fail, people do. Would you agree with that?
Marcus, don't fail, people do. Yeah, I would agree. Especially if you try to figure out the markets on your own, you try to, search these things on the internet. All that's going to pull up is like day trading courses and videos, and 90% of day traders lose 90% of their money within 90 days. That is the statistics. Anyone that says they can beat that statistic is a liar.
Right, kind of like a casino, or
it is a casino. You're betting.
Okay, you're betting.
What I demonstrate for myself and my clients is we put in the actual fundamental work and we crunch the data ourselves. We do not look at the noise. We do not turn on CNBC, none of that, because the data that we crunch speaks for ourselves. As long as you put in the work. Now it's about 8 to 10 hours of work per week if you're a serious portfolio manager, if you're doing it full time. But if you're just a long-term investor, I have a much simpler strategy that will still outperform the 401k and pension fund managers.
There you go.
Not saying everyone should be a trader.
Right. Rob also said that the Dow could drop to 22K and still be in an uptrend. Do you agree with that?
Well, if you're looking at a long enough time span, yes.
Got it.
The market is still significantly higher than it was even 5 years ago. So yeah, you guys got to zoom out when it comes to the markets, especially. Really look into the long term. Don't look into the short term time frames. You really got to zoom out.
Okay, very good. Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, so let's see. We can talk about
I don't know if you want a question.
Inflation, because I know everyone's scared about that.
Okay.
So yeah, everyone's talking about, oh, hyperinflation is coming, or it's already here. But I actually want to show you another data point, which is going to be very contrarian to that rhetoric going around. Which, by the way, this is all public information, guys, that I'm showing you guys. It's nothing proprietary of mine.
Exactly. Yeah, you're just showing us what's right there.
Right. All this information is public. So this is. Can you see that, Beth?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. This is inflation rate in the U.S. month over month. Now, obviously, last year it was at a peak, almost 10%, right? We
Mhm.
were all feeling that pain. If your portfolio wasn't outperforming the inflation, which if you guys are following my system, you would have. But anyways, for the everyday people, though, it was very painful. But overall, it's gone down, as you can see, month by month. And this is because the Fed has raised interest rates. Now, they're not going to stop raising interest rates until we get the 2% target. So we have a little bit ways to go. It could take a few months, could take a year or two until we get that 2%. And by the way, Jerome Powell is going to war against the WEF. That's a whole nother conversation. So he's not as bad as people think. But anyways, as you can see, it's significantly lower. So this is in a year's time span. So we're not in hyperinflation. We're actually in deflation when you see inflation going down, right? That's the opposite of inflation.
I want to jump in here because everyone is banking and capitalizing on our idea of hyperinflation. So they're using it. Like I'm the only person I know that hasn't raised my rates in the last 3 years. In fact, I took mine down just out of the thought that okay, people are compromised and
Yeah.
give them a little bit easier access to work that I know they need. And but everywhere you go, like the gas prices, it was insane, like more than $2 a liter here in Canada last summer. That they're kind of like inching up right now. All the food, it's almost I don't know what is it, double your grocery bill right now when you go in, and so yeah, are they literally just taking advantage of people's perception and going like, oh
Yes.
well, we'll raise because we can, yeah.
Some of that is our artificial inflation, right? But as you can see here, this is a long-term chart of inflation.
Oh, sorry. Here, let me put it up. And then just to talk about hyperinflation itself. Again, I know generally what that means, but what exactly is that?
Well, it's essentially what we had in the 1940s. As you can see here in this past performance, once you get above the 10% level, close to 20% like we did back then, that's hyperinflation. We're nowhere near that right now. We're almost below 5%. So historically, it's not even that bad. I don't know if you guys were alive during the 70s, but I certainly had family members tell me how bad it was. Um, you know, so look at that. In 1980, it's triple where we are today. So you guys got to get some perspective. This isn't hyperinflation.
Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
the short term, we're seeing deflation.
There you go. So good. Um, yeah, Kara was asking, please cover the trend. Countries around the world no longer want to use the fiat US dollar.
That's not
The
true.
It's just not true. Yeah, yeah. I was suspecting. She said the BRICS nations, along with 23 US states, are using gold, from what she understands. Psyop.
That's a little bit of rhetoric that you guys have bought into. The BRICS nations, they're still doing a lot of things in dollars. You guys don't realize. And by the way, the dollars account for 60% of foreign exchange. So you guys got to realize the dollar to the world to stop using the dollar would take a long time in reserves amounts. And by the way, the U.S. dollar is there's a reason why the U.S. dollar has been a reserve currency. Obviously, you guys probably know some of that history, but another reason that you guys might not be aware of is because a lot of people say, "Oh, the yuan, like who's in the BRICS, is going to take over the Chinese currency." But the Chinese currency internationally for wealthy, they stay far away from the yuan because they know how untrustworthy the Chinese government is when it comes to economic data. And yes, in some level, all countries do use deception in those numbers. They kind of fudge the numbers here a little bit here, a little bit there. But overall, China is the worst, and you can measure that yourself. In America, we can stress test the data, and it is pretty accurate compared to other countries. So because of our transparency and our strength and energy, again, the world runs on energy. And there's a reason why they took off the gold standard. It actually was for the better. I know it's going to trigger a lot of people, and that's a whole nother conversation. I do talk about the dollar, why it's not going anywhere. I have a dollar collapse video on my YouTube that gets in the full minutia of the subject. I highly recommend you check that out. But yeah, the BRICS, they're irrelevant. I mean, they're a tiny part of the economy overall.
Okay, very good. And there's an excellent question about from Fakebook, hello, Elizabeth, how does the green climate change and carbon tax work into the markets? Are they now trading on carbon credits?
No, that's too simple of an explanation. There are carbon credit derivatives, but that's its own market. It's not related to the stock market.
Okay, very good. And Flatsmack says if it's all bankers' debt and government debt, there's no value backing it, then discharge and set off all charges.
Well, then that gets into the sovereign stuff. I don't advocate that stuff at all. Debt discharge, any of that. Remember, you signed a debt contract. In a lot of these cases, mortgages, stuff like that. You are responsible. You are the personal guarantor. There's no getting out of that, unless for some reason they really screwed up and mess up your name, the contract, or something like that. And I already hear the quantum cult, saying, "Oh, they're using fraudulent grammar and all that." Supposedly, that's why 2008 collapse happened. But I mean, guys, we got to get out of that sovereign thinking. Let's get into reality.
Amen. I like reality.
Yeah.
I like reality more than I want to be right. That's
But
it.
I would say overall, though, we're already seeing people defaulting it on their debts the last year. We're going to see that continue, especially in auto loans, stuff like that, because we had all these stimulus ballers getting stuff they couldn't afford, stuff like that, over leveraged, even high net worth people. A lot of people think, oh, doctors, lawyers, they're very wealthy because they got the nice car, the nice house, but they don't realize they got so much student loans. Their life is over leveraged just to fit in with the Jones. And so they're often, on a net basis, not that wealthy. In fact, always negative. Well, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time.
Right. Yeah, just living beyond their means.
Exactly. And that's most of America, unfortunately. But
Right. Yeah, we're still in a debt culture, correct?
yeah, we are. I think that's shifting, especially in the younger generation. People my age, they're steering away from getting mortgages right now, which I think is a good idea. That's actually one of the few property items I do say buy with cash. Do not use debt, unless it's a cash flowing property where you're renting it out, stuff like that. That's a little different. But when it comes to personal residence,
Okay, sorry for the background noise if you hear it. And Kevin, we're going to talk about CBDCs at length, so we'll
yeah.
definitely get into that. Yeah, nice to see you.
So we can get into that right now, actually, CBDC.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let's do it.
So, so yeah, everyone's freaking out. You're seeing all over social media, Telegram. Oh, the CBDC is happening tomorrow. How long have we seen that, by the way? And they've been wrong month after month. It's just like the QBs.
Yeah, well, there was an article going through my feed yesterday that it had happened in Australia, that it was a done deal, and everybody was like, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh, interesting. So you say no.
Well, I can only speak for the states. The CBDC is not happening in the states. There's a particular reason why I know high net worth individuals are not worried about it at all. And trust me, they have much better data than you do. Oftentimes, they have better intelligence than even the intelligence agencies. But anyways, that's a whole nother conversation. But essentially, why are they holding dollars if that was going to happen? Well, it's because they know it's not going to happen. Second of all, why am I so confident why it's not going to happen? Well, let's think. In a digital currency, which, by the way, the dollar has been digital since the 1980s. You think all those dollars in your ATM is all there in the branch? It's not. So we got to break this programming like this is a new thing. It's been a thing for decades. And it's nothing to be scared of. It's just how the system works right now. What are you going to do? Create your own system? Create your own economy? I mean, good luck with that. Create your own currency and sovereign nation? Good luck with that.
And is it basically scarcity programming, or is there anything
It
deeper?
is.
Yeah, it's just fear, right?
Well, there's the spiritual side of it. This is fear porn. And I'm careful to use that word on YouTube, but it's essentially that it is. Now, I want you guys to think about this. Let's go to cryptographic currencies. Oftentimes, cryptocurrencies now. Cryptographic currencies is actually put in law as a munition for the US military. It's essentially seen as ammo, it's an economic weapon. It's been put in law for decades. And essentially, what's needed to generate these cryptographic currencies? Well, it's a lot of computing capacity. In other words, very powerful supercomputers. And what are those supercomputers? What are they dependent on? Well, of course, loss of energy. So, with the energy crisis that we've seen, especially with the whole Eastern Europe events, I'll be careful what not to say in terms of that. But as far as we see, we're not so independent on energy as much as we were, right? Now, it takes a lot of energy to create one cryptographic currency, just one. And so, with all that said, all the energy that's needed, oops, sorry, that's the market ending right there. So, with all that said, the amount of energy that's needed, think of how much infrastructure would be needed to be built for the CBD system. Think of all the cashier lanes and all the stores. It would need to be changed over, and that's guaranteeing, or that's betting on that they even have the energy to back up this stuff, which they don't. So we need to think through these things logically. So the energy thing is a big part of it, but another thing is too is the infrastructure, which again hasn't been built, would take a while to build. And I do know people that work in this sector, and let me tell you, they are confident that this is not going to happen either, because they're the ones that would build infrastructure, and it's not happening.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well said, Rob. Be pleasantly surprised when you're wrong. That's where I'm at. Yeah, and others suspecting. Would you say crypto is controlled up?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Who do
yeah.
you think created it? It was the intelligence agencies. Who has the most powerful supercomputers in the world? It's just intelligence agencies. Now, some of it was domestic, some of it was foreign, but at the end of the day, there is no such thing as Satoshi Nakamoto. There's not one single guy that supposedly went against the central bank system and created this thing. I mean, this is so ridiculous.
Very good. And so you don't have any cryptocurrency?
Oh, I actually no, and I actually shorted Bitcoin back in December 2021. I
What does
made
that mean?
I bet on it going down because my indicators were telling me it was going down, and I monetized on it going down with
Okay.
my shorts. I
Okay.
used derivatives on that. And yeah, this guy has it right. Credit cards were the first cryptos. There's some truth in that. And by the way, cryptos, that's the technology ultimately backing your phone, stuff like that. But anyways, yeah, the digital currency has been here. I don't get why people think it's a new thing.
There you go. Yeah, and people are going the other direction to bartering and wanting to make their own currencies and trading with friends and that kind of thing.
Uh, I mean, see how efficient that is and how rich you can get off of that. I mean, to me, true freedom is FU money.
If you
And
money.
so you're not going to get that living in the scarcity mindset saying, oh, I have to barter to get out of the tax system or the dollar fiat system. That's what poor people, all the high net worth individuals I know, they're not thinking like that at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it was in the chat earlier too, just about, someone almost always says that the love of money is the root of all evil.
I disagree. I think the lack of money is the root of all evil.
Okay. Not that money is the root of all evil. I think it's the love of money. And that this is where personally I think if money is your first priority, then given that it is a literally just a symbolic, inert, not alive, just agreed upon. If we agreed tomorrow that money was a thing, it would just there would be no evidence of it. And so if your first love is money, then
Yeah.
I think you're gonna live an empty life. You may end up with gobs of money, but that's all. And how
Right.
common is that story, right? That they got everything they wanted and they felt empty and killed themselves, or had to start again, or whatever it was.
Yeah. And I was fortunate to come into quite a bit of money at a very young age, my young 20s. It didn't fulfill me at all. I had a larger vision in mind. So again, money is not the goal. The goal is just having optionality, which money does give you. But money is just the tool. See it as a tool. You're not the tool. You don't have to be the tool itself. It's often the same when I talk about limited liability companies. People think, well, because if I use a limited liability company, that makes me the thing. Okay, well, that's not true. Sometimes we need to use a tool to get the thing done. Just because I use a hammer to build a bench doesn't mean that the bench is the hammer.
Yeah, well said. Very good. And yeah, so anything else about CBDCs? That, if I could ask one question about that, for example, that now there's the CBDC. I think people are worried about is the globalist one, right? That every
Mhm.
single country in the world would be under a global currency. Now, what I'm seeing with the Bank of Canada is they're looking at a regional CBDC. So how would those two be different?
Well, they already have the international currency. They're called special drawing rights,
Hmm.
um, which, by the way, every country has some allocations in. That's actually put out by the International Monetary Fund. Um, but it's actually nothing to be too concerned about. Um, People, I think, overthink it. Um, so there is that. But to go to the domestic thing, now the CBDC, it could happen domestically in Europe and in the Commonwealth countries per se. But again, that would take some years to roll out the infrastructure for. So this is not going to happen tomorrow. But in the States in particular, cash is always going to be king. That's unfortunately, it's where human trafficking, the drug cartels, they're completely dependent on worldwide. They're using U.S. dollars cash, so that's one of the biggest reasons why cash isn't going anywhere. But yeah, on the domestic level, for certain countries, after a certain point, it could happen, but again, it would be a lot of infrastructure um, that would need to be taken place. And I don't think people would comply with it 100%. I think the mask thing was a good barometer of seeing how compliant people are. Um, and even you, Beth, mentioned they try to have the QR thing in Canada. People didn't comply with that. And a lot
Yeah,
of people say, oh, they're going to pull the rug on us and blah, blah, blah. I mean, look, get some backbone, people. I mean, even if they do roll it out, get some backbone. Again, eh, we got to stop living in fear. Even if it does happen, we have God. I mean, why do we have to freak out about artificial money, anyways? Money is artificial.
exactly. And that's why we're teaming up. Maybe I'll throw in a little note about the Primal Power course coming up. It's specifically on the private domain, which Brendan is also an expert in. I will hazard a guess to say, or not a guess, but just a claim. And along with Clint Richardson, he's contributing to the next Primal Power course, where we're going to detox all of the fear around this, because that's what has people believing in these collapses and running like chicken with their head cut off. And I have 3 gardens. Why do I have 3 gardens? And plus a share from a CSA coming. And like, why is that? Because we're trying to guarantee. Oh, when they lock us out of the grocery stores. It was close. It was close during the pandemic. They did
Yeah,
try. There was lots of places I couldn't go into, but I could still buy
right.
online. And so if it's always that kind of fear chasing you, then it's exhausting. It's a miserable life. Your likelihood of staying on purpose, on your purpose, and creating in your image, to me, it's almost a miracle. I was able to do double duty. Let the fear determine to some degree, and then create anyway. Like the future is going to keep existing. And I always felt like I was actually creating the future when I put out a 7 month coaching training. I felt like I was creating 7 months ahead of me that might not have existed, but that I'm seeing is more confusion. So yeah, the opportunity to deprogram at the level of your own psyche. What is the most suppressed experience of all is the fear that you're not going to make it.
Right.
And even though the vast majority of people don't want to look at this, some of us had to look at it anyway. Whether it was your Job-like experiences or my near-death experience, and some since then as well, where life, and death, it's very confronting. And to get to the core of that and see how you are actually not controlled by it, that it is practically an AI. Well, it is an AI, has no life of its own except what you give it. And then you can turn that ship around, right? It's why I've been, even in the face of what seemed to be total devastation, which wasn't, I was able to keep going and create more than ever.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and go back to the inflation topic. Everyone was complaining about the food prices. Well, that was only if you're shopping at the stores. Why didn't you buy from your local farmer? Why didn't you grow your own food?
Yeah, and that's a super incredible side effect right now because I'm so tapped in locally that I'm not going to need the grocery store this between that and prepping. I won't need the grocery store at all this summer.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to figure that out, and we're going down that route now. Um, I think worldwide even, but especially in the States and Canada, people are starting to figure that out. And people say, well, it costs money to get into that. Well, there's guys like Curtis Stone, that's in Canada. He's demonstrated how you guys can do it on a couple $1,000s, pooling together with 10 people.
Mm-hmm,
It doesn't have to be a big operation.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't need very much land to create your own food at all. I'm so happy. I'm really proud of the skills that I'm gaining, even though there's lots to learn. And we went in and I think we planted like 750 potatoes.
Wow.
Yeah, and it creates excess, not just because last year there was still the excess, right? Like we're still on surplus as far as those potatoes can be preserved, but it's you see your power. We are not nearly as dependent as people think we are.
Don't have to be.
Hmm.
But if you want to keep eating processed foods, I guess, yeah, you know, that's on you. But
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I heard one time that you predicted that food will be like pot used to be, right, where you had to grow it in your basement. So, you still feel that's the case? That
well, I'm 50-50 on that. I never said this 100% sure it's going to happen that way, but um, it could go down that direction. I've already seen people do it in the previous years up to now. Even people have gone down that road and they're doing pretty well. So it depends what you're willing to do, but there is that option.
right? Oh, so maybe I misinterpreted because I thought it was because like growing food will become illegal, for example. That's not what you're thinking,
Oh, well, I was kind of alluding to that. It could happen.
right?
The way things have been going, I'm not saying we're going to stay on that trajectory. I think the pendulum swung too far. One way, I think it's going to swing back. I think it's already happening, especially in Gen Z. A lot of people, especially the older generations, they rip on Gen Z. And yeah, there is a lot of Gen Z that use pronouns, stuff like that, but they're not accounting for, I think, over 60%, if not 80% of Gen Z um, are seeing the outcomes that older generations have gotten, and they're really based, actually. So I have hope in the coming years. I'm not a doom glimmer by any means. I hope you guys can tell that by my presentations. There's no need to be. I used to be, though, like that story I had back in 2015.
Hmm.
And where did that lead me? Well, not anywhere fruitful.
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly. And so, do you want to talk briefly about the straw man? Because I know you and Clint have a good relationship, and I actually came back to the straw man. I was pretty convinced that there was no validity there, but it's just the story, the narrative around it is so embellished and convoluted.
Uh, yeah, I'm just so frustrated by people thinking that your name and all of that, the straw man's trade on the stock market. First of all, that's not how markets work. Second of all, show me the financial statement through the SEC on where that's being traded. There's about 5 to 7 thousand stocks on the market in the U.S. None of them are people. They're persons. When I say persons, corporations, but that's not. Again, people assume that Eurocap's name is a corporation. Yeah, there's a little bit of truth in that, but it's not what people think. And to be a corporation trade on the stock market, you have to be a company reporting your finances to the public through the SEC, stuff like that. You have to have earnings. You got to have all sorts of things like Walmart does or 3M. So people don't understand how the markets work, and then they try to correlate it with the sovereign stuff. Now, it is a form of slavery having that, but it doesn't have to be, though. That doesn't have to be the end of the story. Now, some people say, "Oh, well, I take control of the all caps name," but I'd rather go down the route of the Rockefeller thing of "Oh, nothing, control everything." I think that's a much smarter route to go in, a lot less work, and it's going to be a lot better for you in the long run. Instead of spending hours studying these strategies, which there's 5 million out there now, the sovereign gurus, everyone thinks their process is better than the other, and none of them can actually prove anything. It's quite alarming to me. But really, if you guys want to know the truth about the straw man, I would recommend Clint's book, the 1200 book or 1200 page book. You know,
1146.
yeah.
Yeah.
But my whole point of my system is I I don't make the money. The other person that I control does. In all my business ventures and trading, investing, all of that. So that's my operating. Um, that's my how my operation looks, and what I demonstrate for people.
Right, right. And that's what Jade is asking. How do you own nothing and control everything? It's frighteningly close to the WEF, own nothing and be happy. Like, is that
Right.
so?
Well,
You want to segue into the WEF? What you think of that whole
oh,
side?
it's not as scary as people think. People think Klaus Schwab runs the world. I mean, that's just ridiculous. He's just a talking pundit. Essentially, he's a nobody. Um, he just happened to be part of a powerful family in Europe, and he got to that position in the WF. Doesn't mean he controls policy or anything. In fact, now remember, there are factions of elites. There isn't just one group of elites. They're all in line with each other. Like I said, there's no such thing as good guys or bad guys. And so you have many, many elites who laugh at Klaus Schwab, some of which I know, and they're not worried about this guy at all. He's a clown. Um, but whenever he says one thing, people think, "Oh, this is the end all be all. This is how the world is." Why are you giving him so much credit?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that was actually something I saw in the pandemic too, which gave me comfort, is that there were competing factions. It wasn't just like one organized machine against the people. It was a whole bunch of different competing interests going on. Do you agree with that?
Sorry, can you phrase that one more time?
Just that there was multiple factions, not just one machine against the people, but
Right.
the whole angle, a bunch of different angles.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sure, we have groups like the Masons, but you have also groups like them too, and they're always competing. Especially in Satanism, they're experts at compartmentalization. So there's not going to be one group running it all. But if you really want to get down to it in the brass tacks, sure, this is Satan's realm temporarily. Again, this is not the end all be all. But um, not all the elites are on the same page. In fact, the American elites in particular, they're not going along with a lot of the WF. And Jerome Powell, he's being used as a proxy to fight a lot of the WEF stuff that's going on. So that's why you're seeing all these talking heads just furious that he keeps raising interest rates. But he's going to keep doing it. And that's what the WF crowd doesn't want to happen.
Why not?
They want us in inflation.
Right, which is why they spread that propaganda that we're in hyperinflation, right?
Yes, and unfortunately, the influencers and the talking heads in the alternative space, they're playing along with that, whether they know it or not.
To what degree do you think they know it? I know it's a very hard
I
question.
don't think they know. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go, and that makes them even better pawns, so to speak, because they have no problem with their conscience, right? They actually feel right.
Yeah, they think they're doing the right thing. So I'm not saying they always have bad intentions. Some of them do, but overall, I think they're just useful. I don't want to call them idiots, but useful players.
Right. Yeah. We'll censor that word. There you go. Joy is saying, if you don't mind, a few questions here.
Sure.
Banks or comment points, I guess. Banks create all our money as interest-bearing debt owed to themselves. How long would it take you to own and control nearly everything if you had that privilege? You agree with that statement?
That's a strange dichotomy to look at this. I don't. That's confusing to me. I don't understand what she's saying.
Okay, fair enough. If you want to clarify, Joy, you can. And Australia dollars are traded in the US on the SEC. AU is in debt as a company, as an insolvent company. We have a right to discharge and set off. Absolutely.
No, that's in the foreign exchange market, which is different market than companies. So again, this is a lot of the sovereign stuff that's been going on since the 90s that hasn't been true for over 30 years. The AU, I know particularly, it's part of the foreign exchange rates, or I'm sorry, the currencies, I should say, which I do follow the AU quite a bit. It's one of the indicators I look at, the macro. But yeah, to simply say that it's a company that's insolvent, that's not true.
Yeah, there was a lot of rhetoric around Canada being a bankrupt country as well. Bankrupt corporation.
They're not bankrupt. And Clint, he does a lot of good work on that subject in particular. They may go insolvent from time to time, but they're not bankrupt. And to say that it's a corporation is too simple of an explanation. Often this layering of corporations and trusts and PMAs.
Right. Yeah, that was a question that came up. You and I talked about it briefly the other day, just about the bank structure. That people always think that the Federal Reserve is private and that the banks are public, and it's actually the other way around, right?
It literally is, yeah.
I just shared Clint's link, by the way. This is where you can download his rather large book for free.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm going to get a hard copy as well.
And get a hard copy because it's a cool thing to have on your coffee table as a conversation starter. It really is. Even with some of my normie friends, which I don't really like calling them that because I prefer actually them over the conspiracy people. Because
Oh darn, I don't have any left.
that's funny. And they're not even like completely normie. They get a lot of the things I say. They're not into the conspiracy stuff, which I like because it's not a wasteful conversation. But anyways, yeah, get the physical copy. But yeah, you have that correct though. The Fed is as public as it gets. I did talk about that in a private workshop. By the way, a lot of the dollar collapse stuff I did go over in Best private workshop. Definitely check that out.
Yeah, that's in the House of Free Will.
Yeah, so it gets in the full minutia as well as my video on YouTube. But yeah, so I don't want to repeat stuff for you guys. But yes, the banks are actually designed to be trusts. A lot of them even call themselves trusts at the end of their name. You see that in TD Bank in Canada.
Exactly.
That's probably the biggest example. But yeah, the overall structure is for banks as a trust. It has to be to be for shareholders, stuff like that, and depositees, members, let's say. So in the corporate, not even the corporate, but I guess in the overall structuring of banks, you do have a mix of trusts, companies, and a PMA in there. It's an interesting business model. And then the Federal Reserve, again, it's not private. There is no Class A shares because it's not a corporation. It's an independent branch of the government. I don't want to repeat Clint's work too much, but he does do quite extensive research on that. And you know, you got guys like Ron Paul saying, "Oh, you got to audit the Fed." Well, they're audited every year and it's public. Any one of us can get that data. And the Fed is actually as public as it gets. As I was saying in my last videos with you, Beth, and some of my own, they're very transparent, especially with Chairman Powell. He tells you months ahead of time what they're going to do. And so it's not a surprise if you're paying attention. It's just people want to bury their head in the sand and say, "Oh, it's private because of Griffin's book." And by the way, he's a shill.
I was going to ask. Yeah, can you say a little bit about that? Because that's what everyone waves around. Edward J. Griffin's book.
Basically, it's rhetoric. It's not backed up. Clint knows a lot more about that than I do. But that's probably something you should talk about when you have him on next. But essentially, it was just fear rhetoric. So, yeah, I mean, look into it for yourselves. Don't just believe some guy just because he wrote a book. Don't even believe what I'm saying. Go look for yourself, and don't think you can find all the answers in a simple Google search. I think people just need to be willing to do the work themselves. And I know a lot of people work a job, so they might not have time, but I would caution away from making baseless claims as well, um, because oftentimes it's going to affect how you see the world, and how you see the world is going to drive your actions. And
Mhm.
if you're incorrect, then you're going to, be in a scarcity mindset. And
Right.
so, and that's why I always come back to, I guess for me personally, that's why I was so interested in finance and law, because we weren't taught about it at all.
Mhm.
They're counting on us to be ignorant on it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So we're nescient children, just sucking our thumb and being in denial about things that could otherwise be right in front of us that we could look at.
Yeah.
Um,
And somebody's saying I'm a psyop. I mean,
yeah, I was just gonna say. Yeah.
anyone that knows me personally, which Clint does, and some of my followers do personally, because we hang out in person. I don't do everything on the internet. Um, I mean, if you think I'm a psyop and other people aren't, then I don't know what to tell you. I'm pulling up real data. What are these people doing?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I asked what the basis for that was, and so feel free to share, Flat Smack, if you have anything more about that. I don't think FE qualifies for calling somebody a shill, for sure.
I mean, yeah, I mean, FE is on the bottom of the barrel when it comes to important topics. I mean,
Hmm.
like, who cares what people think the shape of the Earth is? I mean, that's
Hmm.
irrelevant.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, we got a few trolls around. Let's say.
Yeah, I guess
Right.
I trigger a lot of the sovereigns because I basically tell them they're not sovereign.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I know you've talked about that at length, but why do you guys say that?
Well, there's several reasons why, but to be sovereign, you have to have subjects. What subjects do you have? Like Clint says. Second
Hmm.
of all of these remedies, whether it's create a trust and put your all caps name in it and the social security number, all this kind of stuff, that doesn't hold up. That's never worked in court. And when we have ever seen proof of that, um, I'm sorry, you can't be sovereign. It's this endless rabbit hole that people have been led down to. Um, and I think that's the whole psyop, the whole sovereign movement. It's been going on for a long time, since the 1960s. And where has it gotten us? Nowhere as a society. When has it done anything but put people away?
Hmm.
My whole point is to blend in and not have to go to court. But a lot of people think they want to go to court, and it's just ridiculous. Why would you want to do that?
Hmm.
They're not going
Well,
to play it fair.
yeah, yeah. No, they think that maybe they. I mean, you see people talking about that. I don't really see that many people. A handful. I should know a
Yeah,
lot more people really doing it at this stage.
yeah, and a lot of people think they're under God's law. I had a guy ripping on my system recently. He's got a pretty big Telegram channel, and he's been gone for some almost months now. I'm not sure what happened, but he claimed to be under God's law, not man's law. Said that my system was under man's law. Um, but where did that land him? Well, it landed him in jail, and now they're asking me to bail him out.
Right, right. There you go. Yeah, not good. And oh, Jade's back on. I can't figure Jade out if he's a troll or what. But yeah, yeah. I mean, when it comes to the sovereign, to me, God is the sovereign. Like that's the meaning of sovereign,
Yes,
right? Rules over. So we can't. We are the. If you can call, I don't know if you can call us subjects of God, children of God, children.
yes,
Yeah. So we have a sovereign source, but we ourselves are not. We are ruled, and that's both private, as far as I'm concerned, privately under God, and then publicly because of our status as indentured slaves, right? And there's a lot of backlash against that, like, oh, I'm not a slave. And it's like, well, show me some proof that you're not.
Right. So show me how you're above the law. Really, that hasn't worked out for anyone, especially the sovereign people. Um, it's unfortunate that they think they got to fight these battles. Again, I always focus on finances for a particular reason. Trust me, I've been down all these rabbit holes over the years, and to me, the most free people that I know focused on finances to better their families' lives.
You want to say more about that?
I mean, yeah. I mean, why would I focus on the slavery aspect of things when instead I could focus on just blending in the system, not having to go to court, none of that BS, and I can get optionality for myself, my family, and what I mean by that is just essentially, I want to get wealthy enough so my kids never have to get a job. And by the way, my kids aren't going to have SSNs or birth certificates.
Oh, they won't. Okay, yeah. So
No,
that's a
with
good
my
idea.
system, yeah, with my system, we don't have to. By the way, Clint and I will be rolling out something for people because he's been telling people for years not to do that kind of stuff. And for a while, he didn't have a way to get the things they wanted when they get older. But now we do. So we're going to be rolling that out at some point. But essentially, that's how I approach these things. Don't be a victim. It goes back to the archetypes workshop that we did, Beth. Um, don't be a victim. Don't think that the system cares about you individually. They don't. So you got to care for yourself.
Indeed. Yeah. So many levels of psyop, right? Like some people are really comfortable knowing, oh, well, whatever happens, the government's always here for me. Because when it floods, they bring sandbags. And, when there's a pandemic, then they come with the poison injections and stuff. So yeah, that's maybe the most, the most extreme child level. But I think what people don't realize is that the controllers, if you call them that, they understand there's multiple layers. There's a whole, just the same way that there's different factions that are in the elite side. There are different levels and layers of people with a variety of belief systems, and I think they prepare for those multiple layers, right, so that they can reach more than just the bunnies.
Yeah. And remember, might makes right. I mean, good luck trying to go against, the people with guns and badges. I mean, literally, a state national just got killed in Utah a couple months ago.
Also,
He got pulled over, and this wasn't his first incident with the police. In fact, him and his mother were both in the state national movement, and they're causing some issues locally. But anyways, basically, he had a gun on him, and the cop saw that in his hand. It's not like he was, in the glove department or something. So, the cops unfortunately lit him up. It was really sad to see, all because he refused to give a form of identification.
mm, mm.
Oh, well, he did actually show them a passport, and he said, "Oh, this is do not detain." They think that they have a do not detain status, and the cops have to recognize that. But here's just more proof of what we've seen time again that isn't real. So we got to stop, seeking, especially in the law, remedies amongst men and their strategies. The only, like you said, Beth, the only true sovereign is God, and so my whole point is to blend in so we don't have to deal with any of that stuff. If I get pulled over, I just show my ID. I have my driver's license. Who cares? I just pay a little tax. So, I mean, you got to pick your battles, and certainly stuff like that is not on the totem pole for me. It's such a waste of time, and especially looking into the remedies. I mean, what a waste of time. I'd rather be making money personally, bettering my situation. So I have more optionality. So, hey, if I do end up needing to leave the country, which I don't see coming, I can after a certain point.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I'd rather be creating That's my thing. That I have work to do, and that I almost died, and it became so clear to me that if I was to die with my work inside me, that would be the tragedy, not the death, but the death of what's in me. And I take that very seriously. I have a lot of sense of responsibility around that. And, and then there's a certain amount of wealth that's required to accomplish any task. When I wrote my book, I don't know, what did I invest in it? I don't know, $12,000, like insane amount of, and not all of it well spent. I made mistakes for sure, but it was an undertaking, and it was a great deal of work. And it's one of those things that at the end of the day, you're, without having some kind of uh, resource, then I couldn't have put that work out. And then to this day, I'm still getting, oh, I just read your book for the third time, or my dog is reading your book. Just got a
Right.
selfie yesterday. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and someone in the chat says is alluding to a guru's lawsuit is not a waste of time. Look, if you want to sue people, that's on you. Just realize it's very costly and time intensive. It's in my opinion, I don't want to do that stuff unless I absolutely have to, which I've never absolutely have had to.
exactly. I'm the same way. Like, that's why I don't mind supporting, because there are people who were pulled into that system,
Right.
whether that was in a relationship. And I know you guys have lots to say and planned for helping people not get into those kind of litigious kind of situations in relationships. But I'm not going there. Like, you can't convince me to file a lawsuit. I don't care how much support I have, because I see everybody's in it for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and then they
Yep.
lose.
They
10
do.
years and they
Yeah.
lose. Right? Like,
It's not a guarantee, it's a gamble.
it's another gamble.
You can
Exactly.
have all the case law, you can have all the points on your side, and it's really up to the judge.
Right. Right.
I don't
And
trust those guys.
right. And whoever knows court procedure better. Right? So then it becomes a
Right.
game, and it's not really a game of right and wrong
No,
anymore.
it's
Then,
not.
then it's a math puzzle.
Well, even then,
Mm,
you're in their court. By the time you show up in their court, it's already too late.
mhm,
You already lost in some fashion.
mhm,
So,
mhm. And do you agree that courts are a corporate franchise, that they're just simply in business?
uh, it is commercial, but also it's a church. Um,
Mm. Oh, interesting. Can you say more about that?
oh, it's very satanic. There's a lot of esoteric stuff that goes along with that. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. But it's, I mean, if you're a Christian, if you're comfortable going in a courtroom, something's wrong. Um, it's not my venue that I want to be in. They are Masons. That is correct, person in the chat. Especially the judges. You do not want to mess with that stuff if you don't have to. And people have all of these stories of the court wins and all that, but it's a gamble. And in my system, we never have to go to court. Why would you? I'm focusing on business.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
focusing on asset allocations. That's a complete waste of my time. So
Yeah.
again, when it comes to the core stuff, when it comes to take control of your straw man, who cares about your straw man? I'm not using it. I'm using a straw man that I create.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
really could care less about that. But yeah, to go back to the financial stuff,
For sure.
I didn't fully address a lot of the fear porn that's out there. Another
Yep.
thing I want to address is gold. There's a lot of gold bugs. They think gold is going to be the ultimate remedy. The dollar is going to collapse. And people have been saying that for years. People like Peter Schiff, Robert Kiyosaki, who have both been wrong for decades, time and time again. Their predictions are always off and wrong. They say gold is going to go into 10,000 ounce or 100,000 ounce an ounce. And they're constantly wrong. And what are they connected to? Whether they're connected to metals companies or they're selling books related to fear. So again, the dollar is held by the wealthy international, and I can attest to that. These guys have liquidity in dollars. That's not going to change. And so, yeah, recently we had China. They acquired natural gas in yuan, their currency, and France, they said some derogatory stuff about the dollar, but okay, so what? I mean, it's just a bunch of tough talking and no action. Um, I think of how many dollars in the world. I mean, most of the world's elites have in their portfolios American stocks, and mainly in S&P 500, which I displayed earlier. What's that valued in? And what, by the way, that's a trust, the S&P, the SPY index. What's that valued in? Well, that's valued in dollars. So the dollar is not just a confident sentiment on a particular country's currency around the world. With the dollar, it's much different. So don't be fooled that the dollar is the benchmark for spending power and net worth worldwide. And again, if you want to get the full minutia on why the dollar is not collapsed, I did a workshop with Beth that talked about that. I have my own video on that on YouTube that's public. But I just I think that's the most frustrating thing. Is really the sovereign people and then the financial doomsdayers, and it's leading people down a really dark path where they don't have any hope for the future. They don't. I think a lot of times they lose trust in God and really themselves.
This is the big thing, Brandon. This is the big thing. And I did luckily find it inside myself, the place where I realized very unconsciously I was waiting for God to drop the shoe. Or how does that say? Or how, that saying go? Or, to drop, God to fall through, God to drop the ball. There it is. That's what I was looking for. Not good at expressions. And it was like a wow for me to see that inside myself. And it kept part of me really wound up and like, always waiting and vigilant, so vigilant all the time. And it was a really good turning point for me just to reclaim
Yeah.
a whole bunch of my life energy in the process and trust God a lot more. But you're obviously not talking about blind faith because you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at the facts, you're following the trends, you're studying enough to be able to see what's happening and then still trust God that feeds the sparrow with that they don't even order from the menu and God feeds them. Right.
Yeah, remember in 2020 when the world was going to collapse, everything was going to go to zero, and it didn't. I mean, if that doesn't do it, I don't know what will.
Right.
But second of all, I want to go back to the CBDC thing. Another thing I forgot to mention, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mentioned that it takes an incredible amount of energy to create one cryptographic currency, one unit of Bitcoin. I use it, for example, which again is a Psyop. Do not invest in cryptos. But anyways, now with the energy component of it, which I've demonstrated takes an enormous amount of energy. And second of all, where are the commodities that are made or that are used to make the computing hardware, like the chips, even other commodities too related to computing software and hardware? Well, a significant amount of those commodities that are pulled out of the ground to make these computing components are actually in Russia and China. Do you really think that they're going to be willing to trade with us that amount of commodities, especially right now with sanctions on Russia? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just a question of the volume.
They don't have that. America, they're still on back order on chips for 2 years from now. I mean, that's just for everyday computers. Imagine what they would need for supercomputers. So there's so much minutia on the subject, but I really tried to sum it up for you guys.
We appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're getting some love here from Stuart. Thank you. Yeah. What do you think about land as an investment? I know you talked about houses, not a great investment, obviously.
Well, personal residence should not be your first investment. Land in particular, look, it depends on your situation and your financial situation ultimately, individually. There is no one thing everyone should do. I mean, there's no blanket term strategy that a lot of these gurus teach you in the finance world. There's a lot of buzz about real estate, not as much the last year because with rising interest rates, stuff like that. But when it comes to land or just real estate as of large, it should only be a part of your portfolio. It should not be your biggest investment. And look, I think it's nice to have your land, but not a lot of people can do that right now. If I were to buy a piece of land, actually, to, let's say, grow some food on, stuff like that, I would actually, in that case, use private debt. I wouldn't go through a mortgage. And again, this would only be to generate food and resources. It wouldn't be for me to really necessarily live on. That's the only way I would use debt for land or real estate, let's say, would be owner financing, which is a private debt. I'll probably be making another video on that soon. I have a couple experts on that subject. I do know quite a bit about it, but I'd rather have those guys talk about it for my audience, just because they've been there, done that plenty of times. I don't like real estate particularly because, well, there's several reasons. Based on my skill set, it's not where I park my money.
And is it your DIY skill set, like in terms of do you drive a plow and a tractor and all those kind of things? Or
Well, I can do the labor. In fact,
yeah.
I did that quite a bit as when I was younger. Worked for an older guy's on an older guy's property. It's not the manual labor that is really the big factor, even though I don't really have time for that nowadays. But essentially, I'm able to grow my money in the markets, and so I just park my money mostly in that. But again, that's only for myself. I'm not telling everyone to do that. In fact, my clients, I don't tell them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things that I think gives you credibility is that you really don't have to be doing this. You didn't have to come forward and try to assist with all of the myths and the psyops that are out there, right? Like it's not a need on your part, from what I gather, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy putting my face out there. I've been very private over the years. But I mean, I feel like I've been called to do this now, so I got to get over that, and I have been the past year. Um, and it's really interesting to see because I guess I'm just so used to my way of thinking because I'll call up a business partner or somebody and be like, oh, yeah, why wouldn't you do it that way? The stuff I talk about, but I guess I didn't realize how different it is. So it's been really fun to work with people, and I actually do enjoy that aspect a lot. I love problem solving, especially for other people.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a really good skill. And well, I wonder, are we starting to get to the end of your points? Is there anything else that you wanted to go deeper in?
Um, I mean, I made my points. I summarized a lot of them, just because like each subject is like his whole video in its own.
Mm-hmm.
But I gave you the main meat that you guys need. Um, after this, especially the data I presented, just realize, go off the data, shut off all the noise. I mean, please. I only use Telegram to follow your channel and keep up on mine,
Oh, yay.
and message people. I don't follow a lot of these channels. Everyone tells me, oh, go follow this channel or that channel. Buy this new crypto or follow this gold guy. I mean, I'm so sick of it. I mean, every time I see it, I just instantly click out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And whenever someone mentions that kind of stuff around me, I instantly just cut them off. Not to be rude, but just to get them into reality. Um, and every time they're always thankful, on a one-on-one call. Anyways, so it's just, that's my biggest takeaway for you guys is really just shut off the noise and do the work. I can show you guys how to do some of the stuff I do, but again, don't go off of someone's opinion with no data and no experience.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a conflict of interest. I'm not selling gold. I'm not selling silver. And I do sell a course and mentorships, but is that really a conflict of interest? I don't think so. It's just my business.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's not my main cash flow. I don't have to be doing this. In fact, I'm going to disappear in a few months probably because I'm getting really tired of the same questions over and over. I think this stuff is easy. This is like baby talk.
Right. Well, thank you very much for talking to us babies, because
Oh,
it
I'm
is.
not calling you guys babies.
Yeah. It is helping.
Yeah.
I just want you to know for sure it's helping.
Thank you. And again, I say I'm going to disappear. Maybe I probably shouldn't, because I do feel called to do this, and I hope it is making a difference for people. But um, eh, we can get. I exclude a lot of information publicly, obviously, because in the hands of certain people, they could do a lot of bad with it. So really, I'm only going to give you guys surface level publicly, but um, if you guys are into the private side, whether it's Beth's private group or mine, there's going to be a lot more solutions than I talk about publicly. But that's what I'm all about at the end of the day: solutions. I've been in plenty of points in my life, like you've reflected on, my Joe moments, where I could have played the victim. I could have blamed all these different factors, people. But at the end of the day, I mean, what's that going to do for you?
Exactly.
I'm certainly not going to be constantly berating on Klaus Schwab or the current president or whatever. Really, I mean, I learned a lot from, again, very wealthy individuals. I was fortunate enough to just to see how they live their lives. It would break a lot of stereotypes of what people think how millionaires live, or deca millionaires. Um, Oftentimes they live below their means. Oftentimes they're very humble. Um, and so, I never want to come off as arrogant or anything like that. It's just, it gets frustrating seeing the same fear rhetoric over and over. But thanks to your work, Beth, and mine and Clint's, hopefully people are starting to get past that and really just start working on solutions for themselves.
Indeed. Yeah, people don't realize, unfortunately, that they are attached to, and even addicted to unconscious fear. It's, people will say, "Oh, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid." But you know, give me 5 minutes and a strong will to actually be free, to go deeper than that. Self-identifying as free. That's it is a rabbit hole worth going in, to study internally what causes you to make your decisions and your choices. How do you go off in a certain direction? And you might be able to justify it intellectually, but the whatever you do out of fear, you are carrying that fear forward into your project or your world or your life. It is the life sucker. It's what I was dying of more than 20 years ago when I had cancer. Was able to turn it around. I'm still turning it around, still doing that very humbling work. It doesn't make you great, but it makes you clear, right? It gives you access to some more reality. It gives you the ability to step outside of your own pride and your own, I don't use the word very much, but your own ego, and see things as they are. And that in itself is an enormous gift, because then you can start making decisions based on what's actually happening, not just your belief about it. So the I feel and I believe and da da da. It's like, well, what really is? Let's get to that. That's, to me, the most exciting possibility of all. I like reality,
I
and
do too. I mean, uh, we need to focus on real life. We need to get away from this alternative space. Especially people like, I won't name names, because I'm trying to stop that, because really I don't want to give these people any attention.
mhm.
But let's work on our real life. Let's not just continue to. Because a lot of people think, and we talked about this in your workshop recently, Beth, where a lot of people feel the need to quote unquote red pill people. But that's such a waste of time. I think actions speak louder than words. Um,
Yeah.
and I appreciate you doing the show, because this is one of my favorite topics. Is really addressing, you know, all this, especially in the finance world. There's so many psyops going on. But it's going to trigger the controls. It's going to trigger people with cognitive dissonance. But at the end of the day, I mean, only those have eyes to see and ears to hear.
Exactly. And I find it amusing that the fear porn is just like everywhere, it goes viral. And then the truth, and then people are like, oh, I don't like optimistic people or whatever, whatever the hang up there is. But yeah, this is solutions, this is optimism. And since Brendan, you've mentioned it a few times, I'm going to share the link to apply for the House of Free Will. This is my private domain ministry, which I'm going to be learning a lot more about. So I'm still baby at this, but we do have a nice assembly of people over there. We have twice a week fellowship, and there is the replay of Brendan's workshop on the private domain. We talked a lot about LLCs, that instrument or tool that you're able to use and work it within this system of slavery in a much more free capacity. Not to say it's a one size fits all or anything like that, but there was really good information in that workshop. And there's another workshop coming up. I just booked Tanya Elfersey, totally different subject, on menopause, which is a really good one to see. I think both men and women should be interested in that, because men have to be around women going through it, and women have to be around themselves going through that. So that's really good. And yeah, tons of workshops there by some gurus. You got by Alphonse and Brett Be Free, not allowed to say his last name, and James the Patriot. So if you got yourself in trouble in the courts for one reason or another, then those are amazing guys, and they're champions, they're resourceful, and they're willing to help people. That's something that's super amazing. And yeah, lots of resources already there in the House of Free Will. And then you get a PDF copy of my book that is A Journey, a map of archetypes to find lost purpose in a sea of meaninglessness, and spend more time with your cat in your backyard. Yes, I agree with that. And if anybody would like to join us for the Primal Power course that's coming up, that both Brandon and Clint are contributing to, then I will also share a link to that. If you are a member of the House of Free Will, there's additional savings. Right now, the early bird is on. It's half the investment. Honestly, I'm giving this stuff away, guys. I just want people to have it and have half a chance at the clarity that is in there in potential. So, Brandon, thank you so much. Anything else you want to share about the work that you're doing and how people can talk to you about it?
Yeah, you could go to the website. Beth has linked below. You get a brief synopsis of what all goes on. If you are privy to the membership, I am starting to be a little overloaded. So, but there's a lot that we can do together if you do become a member. And then also follow me on Telegram. It's where all of my work is. I don't put everything on YouTube, obviously. It's Safe Haven, PMA on Telegram. It's often linked in my stuff as well. And that's really about it. I don't post anywhere else besides there and YouTube nowadays. I guess I don't say anything, too controversial. I'm pretty careful what I say on YouTube, but yeah, if you want to get the real meat, you could join my private club. There's going to be a lot of, it's all solutions based for many everyday people. That's who I really want to help ultimately. So, there's resources for you guys that are everyday people, but also those who are of higher net worth, let's say. So you get best of both worlds. That's where you can find my work. And so yeah, I appreciate the show, Beth. It's always fun to be on here. And yeah, I was anticipating this one to have some trolls, but I think it's motivating actually.
Good. I'm glad. And Michelle, you said that the Telegram link isn't working. I can't imagine why. Let me drop that in a browser and see what happens. It's working for me, so yeah, I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, if the link isn't working, just look up Safe Haven, PMA.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, we're going to be rolling out Clint's new website soon. Hopefully, it'll be ready by the time you interview him next. So yeah, he is getting that together. I'm helping him with it. It's gonna be a lot of good stuff on there for you guys.
Yeah, I believe it's the 22nd is Clint is going to come on and talk about the Bible and the private. So that's going to be really fun.
That'll be exciting. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's mind blowing how much those things correlate. Um, but that's a whole video. And I'm looking forward to that one.
Me too, as well. Yeah, it's been really fun. Well, thank you everyone for joining here in on Rockfin and Fakebook and YouTube. I actually had a good turnout despite the shadow banning. Thank you so much if you shared it out, if you're helping with that. And and Jeff, you search Safe Haven Co. in TG and it comes up. So perfect. Yeah, it was working for me too. Forgive me if I've missed any other comments here, but yeah, there was a lot. And then, yeah, so let's task yourself to send me some information or data. I'm always open, right? I'm not just talking out my butt here about wanting the truth. I'm willing, as soon as I hear something that's more true, I turn in that direction. I'm not making a decision. I'm not weighing anything. I'm just like, oh, the truth. That's a flame for me. I'm a moth. I'm going to go. And I don't know that's not a good metaphor, actually. Most of the moths die in the flames. But yeah, I'm not attached to anything. And, if I have to say I'm wrong 1,000 times, I don't care.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate your work. Um, you know, uh, most people can't. Well, I think they can. It's just most people aren't willing to think like that with that flexibility, and that's how I am too. I've been wrong plenty of times in the past, and I've had to learn a lot of stuff the hard way. Um, and some things the short way, thanks to mentors who've been there, done that, got the shirt before I did. So that saved me an incredible amount of time. But yeah, I don't want everyone to agree with me. In fact, I'm perfectly okay if people disagree with me.
But bring it on. Like bring your facts. Bring your arguments.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Whether it's the finances or the sovereignty stuff, it's most of the time rhetoric. The resources people do send me is oftentimes subjective interpretation, which we're all privy to. We all have normalcy biases, all that kind of stuff. Um, I'm not excluded from that, but again, it's something to be aware of.
It really is. All right, my dears. Well, I think we'll cap it at that for the day. Thank you so much, Brendan. It's been fantastic. I am on again Friday with Jeff Wolfman, who is he was a physician when the whole pandemic started, and that's when he decided he was going to pivot away from his profession. Actually, super brave of him to do that. And I had the privilege of working with him in my coaching training program. So he's got some new skills and new interesting things to bring to people, and a good story to tell about what it's like to leave a very high paying, lucrative career, high status. It's easy. You call yourself a physician, people are ooh ah like this.
Yeah.
And he just walked away. So one of those good rare ones. I think you're going to love it. That's 4 p.m. on Friday in Central Time Zone. All right. Well, I think that's all for today, everyone. I'm going to share the link one last time. It is in the notes below too. This is Brandon's Telegram, and then I'm even going to grab the Primal Power course. The early bird for Primal Power is only up for one more week, so I always offer early savings. I love it when people make a decision sooner because then you don't have to deliberate and decide, and then you get some reward for that. Again, House of Free Will members, there's extra savings. So if you for some reason didn't see an email, just put up your hand and let me know. We have a good Telegram group for the House of Free Will now. It's more fun to be able to chat back and forth. So then feel free. And then we got Bill Gates in the house. He says, "God bless." So that's awesome.
What's up, Bill?
There you go.
Never thought I'd say that. But...
yeah. There you go. Okay. All right, everyone. Love you lots. Thank you, Brandon. Love you as well. And have a beautiful rest of your day.
All right. Take care, guys.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.